My parents sued me for a 15% share of my business, but the trial only served to increase the visibility of my establishment and garnered media attention. This was a shock to my parents. Greetings, Reddit. I am here to vent and seek advice. My life has been tumultuous, and I am unsure how I have managed to maintain my sanity. Here is the situation. I have always felt like an outsider within my own family. My parents harbored a deep-seated hatred for me, which was not merely due to their strict upbringing. They genuinely despised me, and I never fully understood the reason behind their animosity. However, school provided me with an escape, and without it, I doubt I would be here to share my story. My childhood was marked by a pervasive sense of disappointment. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for them. I recall being around 6 or 7 years old, presenting my mother with a drawing I was immensely proud of. I had spent hours meticulously selecting colors and ensuring every detail was perfect. However, upon receiving it, her response was merely a dismissive glance and a comment that she could have done better, leaving me without even a smile. My father was predominantly silent, except when he would erupt in anger over trivial matters. I walked on eggshells around him, fearing that any minor misstep would provoke his wrath. It wasn't just my father. My younger brother was the golden child. They lavished him with affection and praise for even the smallest achievements, bestowing upon him the best toys, attention, and love, which I desperately sought but never received. It was so obvious. Birthdays were a stark contrast. They would throw extravagant parties for Danny, but when it was my turn, it would be a mere afterthought, like, oh, yeah, here's a cake. If I was lucky, sometimes not even that, but here's the thing, I wasn't a bad kid, I was quiet, well-behaved, and did pretty well in school. I think that's what kept me sane. School became my sanctuary, a place where I was genuinely liked by both teachers and classmates. I was perplexed by this, as my family failed to recognize any redeeming qualities in me. Perhaps it was my politeness, helpfulness, or my ability to avoid trouble, but whatever it was, it seemed to work. In school, I had friends, more like acquaintances at first, but they were the only people who made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I was never the most popular kid, but I was the kind of person who got along with everyone, and people seemed to appreciate that I wasn't part of the in-crowd, but I wasn't an outcast either. Middle of the pack, I guess you could say. I listened when people needed to talk, helped them with homework, and just being there felt good. It felt like I was worth something, at least to someone, even if my own family couldn't see it. By the time I got to high school, I was thriving in a way. I got really into literature, joined the debate club, and even found myself tutoring some of the kids who struggled in class. I figured, why not help out? It felt good to be needed, but of course none of that mattered at home. My parents couldn't care less about my grades, my achievements, anything that. Danny, on the other hand, coasted through school, barely passing, but every time he brought home a report card with an A or C, my parents acted as though he had solved world hunger. It was infuriating. I wanted to scream at them. Why can't you be proud of me for once? But I never did. I just kept my mouth shut, stayed out of the way, and counted down the days until I could leave for God. College represented a beacon of hope in the distance. I worked tirelessly to gain admission to a prestigious university, determined to create as much distance as possible for my family. I applied to universities across the country, seeking a fresh start. Upon receiving acceptance to a university several states away, I didn't hesitate. My parents' reaction was minimal. My mother merely acknowledged it with a brief comment, and my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. I should have known better than to expect anything else, but it still hurt. I packed my bags with no assistance and left as soon as possible. It felt like I was running away, but I didn't care. I needed to get out, and that's where I met Marcus. Marcus was my saving grace. If there's one person in this world I owe my sanity to, it's him. We met in a psychology class during our first semester and immediately clicked. He was everything I wasn't. Outgoing, confident, and always cracking jokes. However, he also had a deep side, understanding the complexities of family dynamics. It turned out that he had his own issues with his parents, though his situation wasn't as severe as mine. We bonded over our shared experiences, and before long, We were spending all our time together. He made college bearable and life in general. We would stay up late discussing everything, from life and the future to our difficult families and how we were going to make something of ourselves no matter what. Marcus possessed an energy and drive that I admired. He instilled in me the belief that we could escape the toxicity and create something better for ourselves. He had a way of making everything seem possible. We graduated together, and by that time, we were inseparable. I don't know how to explain it, but he felt more like family to me than my real family ever did. Upon graduation, we both realized we needed to escape our surroundings. We gathered our belongings, minimal as they were, and relocated to a new city. This was intended to be our new beginning, an opportunity to leave our past behind and construct a fresh life. For a time, it seemed perfect, but nothing ever remains flawless, does it? Reality soon set in. As two recent college graduates, we found ourselves struggling in a city where our presence was largely unnoticed. Despite securing jobs, they were dead-end positions barely covering our expenses. Despite the challenges, we remained resolute, believing that anything was preferable to returning home. However, this resolve was soon challenged by a series of inexplicable occurrences. Initially, I received cryptic texts from unfamiliar numbers such as "you can't run forever" or "we know where you are." Initially dismissing them as spam, the situation escalated. One evening, Marcus and I returned to our apartment to find the door unlocked. Despite our habit of double-checking the locks, this incident left us alarmed. Although nothing was missing, the signs of intrusion were evident. Items were misplaced, a window was left open. We reported the incident to the police, but they dismissed our concerns, suggesting it was likely a simple oversight. However, we knew better. It was not paranoia, but rather evidence of someone deliberately interfering with our lives. One night, the situation escalated. Marcus and I were out grabbing food when I received a call from an unknown number. Initially, I ignored it, but the caller persisted, calling repeatedly. Eventually, I answered and heard only heavy, slow breathing on the other end. I hung up immediately, my heart racing. When I informed Marcus, he dismissed it as unimportant, but I could tell he was also unsettled. We decided to install additional locks and a security camera as a precaution. A few days later, while we were sitting on the couch watching television, the doorbell rang. It was late, and visitors were not expected, so we both froze. The camera showed no one at the door, but the bell kept ringing. Marcus got up to check it, and as he opened the door, we heard a loud bang. Someone had thrown a rock through our window, shattering the glass everywhere. We never saw who did it. After that, things calmed down for a while, but the anxiety didn't. Every little noise at night had us jumping out of bed. We both started carrying pocket knives. Not that it would have helped much if someone really wanted to hurt us. Marcus repeatedly urged us to return to the police, but I was uncertain about their potential assistance. Without concrete evidence, we were left with only a series of unsettling coincidences. One night, Marcus failed to return home. He had gone out for drinks with colleagues, but by midnight, I had not heard from him. Despite numerous attempts to contact him, there was no response. I was pacing around the apartment, deeply concerned about his safety. Finally, around 3 a.m., my phone rang. It was Marcus, but when I answered, there was only static. I kept shouting his name, but nothing. The call disconnected, leaving me with a sinking feeling in my stomach. I spent the next few hours calling hospitals, police stations, and anyone who might have seen him. Just as the sun was rising, Marcus appeared at the door, covered in dirt and blood. That's when things really got dark. Greetings, Reddit. I am returning with an update. In my previous post, I recounted Marcus and my journey to a new city, our attempt to escape our troubled families and forge a new life. Since then, our experiences have become increasingly intense. If you have not read the initial part, I will provide a brief summary. Marcus, my closest friend, vanished following a series of unsettling events. My anxiety grew as I struggled to locate him or understand his disappearance. However, after a night of silence, he returned to our apartment, visibly traumatized, covered in dirt and blood. This was merely the start of a series of inexplicable occurrences. Subsequently, Marcus underwent a profound change. He claimed to have no recollection of the events, but as I probed further, our relationship became increasingly strained. He began to exhibit distant behavior, always on edge, and for a period, I suspected he was concealing something from me. He would disappear for hours, sometimes days, and each time he returned, he appeared more distressed, as if he had endured some unseen conflict. Despite my inquiries, he would either dismiss my concerns or become defensive. It didn't take long before I decided I needed to figure this out for myself, so I hired a private detective. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but at that point I didn't know what else to do. I didn't trust Marcus anymore, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something horrible was about to happen. The individual I engaged, Alex Thompson, was a no-nonsense ex-cop with a seasoned demeanor. Upon being informed of the situation, he remained composed, took a few notes, and requested a recent photograph of Marcus. Alex began investigating Marcus's whereabouts, tracking his movements whenever he disappeared. After a couple of weeks, Alex discovered where Marcus was going during his mysterious disappearances. It turned out that Marcus was spending time in a sketchy, run-down part of town. When Alex first told me this, I thought maybe Marcus was getting into drugs or something. Maybe that's why he was acting so weird, but the truth was far more sinister. Alex followed Marcus one night and discovered that he had been meeting with some shady individuals, people who clearly weren't from around here. When Alex described them to me, it sounded like some sort of underground gang or criminal operation. They'd meet in this old abandoned warehouse, and it was clear they were up to no good. My stomach dropped when Alex showed me the photos. There was Marcus standing with these guys, looking like a totally different person. His face was hard, nothing like the Marcus I knew. I felt sick. I confronted Marcus, and at first he denied everything, but when I showed him the photos, he went pale. That's when he finally told me the truth. Marcus had become involved with these individuals after his disappearance. They found him when he was drunk and vulnerable, offering him protection and money in exchange for running errands. Initially, the tasks were minor, but they escalated significantly by the time I discovered Marcus was deeply involved. These individuals exerted control over him, threatening harm to him or me if he did not comply. I was furious, not only at Marcus, but also at myself for not recognizing the signs sooner. However, I couldn't allow him to sink any deeper. We needed a way out. That's when we had this crazy idea. Marcus and I had always dreamed of starting a business together. It was a pipe dream we'd fantasized about while we were broke, college kids sitting in cheap diners late at night, talking about how we'd be our own bosses one day. Well, this was our chance. We figured if we could scrape together enough money and start something, maybe it'd give Marcus the leverage he needed to break away from these guys. It was risky, but we were desperate, so we decided to open a small eatery. It wasn't anything fancy, just a hole-in-the-wall place, serving cheap but good food. Marcus had some culinary skills from his college days when he worked in a kitchen, and I knew my way around managing things, so we pooled what little money we had left and rented a tiny spot downtown. We called it the Hideaway. Fitting right. The first year was incredibly challenging. We struggled to make ends meet, and Marcus continued to face the consequences of his past. He would arrive at the restaurant looking exhausted, but we persisted. The rent was a constant burden, and there were days when we saw only a few customers. There were moments when we considered giving up, but we couldn't. This was our only opportunity to escape the situation we had created for ourselves. An unexpected turn of events occurred when the restaurant's food gained popularity. Word of mouth quickly spread, and before long, the Hideaway had become a popular spot in the neighborhood. Within 3 years, we had a steady flow of customers. It was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a secret gem in the city where people would come to escape the chaos of everyday life. Just like we had. The restaurant's success brought a sense of hope that had seemed distant for a long time, and Marcus appeared more at ease. He was disappearing less frequently, and when he did, it was for shorter periods. We were making substantial profits, and for the first time, it felt like we were on the verge of something significant. We used the profits to open a second location across town, and when that took off, we opened a third. It felt surreal, like we'd finally made it. We were expanding rapidly, and the money kept rolling in, but success comes with its own set of challenges. With each new restaurant we opened, the pressure mounted. Marcus remained entangled with those individuals, despite his efforts to extricate himself. They were indifferent to our success, perceiving it as an opportunity to exert greater influence. The influx of money provided them with leverage, prompting them to demand more from Marcus. He attempted to conceal this from me, but my astuteness allowed me to discern that something was amiss. One night, everything came crashing down. Marcus didn't come home again. I didn't panic this time, at least not right away. I figured he was just out dealing with whatever mess he'd gotten himself into, but when 2 days passed with no word from him, I knew something was seriously wrong. I called Alex, the detective, and asked him to start looking for Marcus again. A part of me was terrified that this time I wouldn't find him alive. After several days of investigation, Alex located Marcus at a hotel on the outskirts of town. Upon arrival, I discovered Marcus unconscious, barely breathing, with a needle protruding from his arm. My heart raced as I rushed him to the hospital, and after a tense night, the doctors informed me that he would survive. However, the incident was too close for comfort. The drugs? These individuals had managed to ensnare him, slowly poisoning him. Marcus underwent months of rehabilitation, reaching a point of despair. For a time, I feared he would never recover. However, against all odds, he persevered and eventually reclaimed his freedom. Upon his release, he vowed to sever ties with those who had contributed to his downfall. Despite my skepticism, I chose to believe him. For the first time in years, Marcus was free. Or so I thought. A year later, the hideaway was thriving. We had opened our fourth location, and the city had come to recognize our name. People loved our food and our vibe. It felt like we had built something that mattered, something real. But just when I thought we were in the clear, the past came knocking. One night after closing up, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold and methodical. They said, "You thought you could walk away, didn't you?" My blood ran cold. It was them, the people Marcus had been involved with. "We're coming for what's ours." I couldn't believe it. Marcus had been absent from the game for over a year. Despite our adherence to the rules and our efforts to remain inconspicuous, our success was not enough to satisfy them. They viewed Marcus and I merely as assets to be exploited for profit. They insisted on a share of our success, and their persistence was unwavering. I attempted to conceal the call from Marcus, but he eventually discovered it. Upon learning the truth, something within him shattered. He was no longer the same. He became paranoid, constantly vigilant, convinced that at any moment they would appear and seize everything we had built. He resumed his drinking habits, consuming heavily, and soon he began to vanish for days at a time. One evening, I returned home to find him standing in the kitchen, holding a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a gun in the other. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with desperation. "They won't stop," he said. "They're going to take everything." Despite my attempts to reason with him, he was determined. In his mind, there was only one way out. That night, Marcus packed a bag and vanished. I haven't seen him since, but the restaurant continues to thrive, more successful than ever. However, each day, I am plagued by the fear that they might come for me next. Marcus left me a note before he vanished. It was short, just 2 words. "I'm sorry. I don't know if he was apologizing for leaving or for what was about to happen, maybe both." So here I am running a chain of restaurants that I built with my best friend, but feeling more alone than ever. I don't know where Marcus is, if he's alive, or if he's ever coming back, but I do know one thing. We can never truly escape our past, no matter how far we run. Greetings, Reddit. I am returning to share an update. Since my previous post, the situation has escalated dramatically. I had hoped for a period of tranquility, but unfortunately, it has only grown more chaotic. Despite the turmoil, we managed to resolve the complications we were facing, and yes, Marcus has re-entered my life. I will elaborate on the circumstances, but suffice it to say, it was not an easy journey. Nothing ever is it? Following Marcus's disappearance, I felt utterly lost. Despite the restaurant's thriving business, I found myself merely going through the motions. I was constantly on edge, fearing that the criminals Marcus had encountered might appear at any moment, armed and ready to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Each night, I lay awake, consumed with worry about Marcus's whereabouts, his safety, and whether he was still alive. A few weeks after Marcus's departure, I received another call. This time, it was not just a random threat, but a direct demand. The caller informed me that Marcus had stolen from them before his disappearance. I was completely unaware of this claim, but they insisted that Marcus had taken a substantial amount of money, which they believed belonged to them. They demanded that I pay it back. I told the caller, my heart pounding, that I had no idea what Marcus had taken, and I did not possess it. I was merely trying to run a business. The caller laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. You're running Marcus's business, which means you're in this just as deep as he is. Pay up or we'll collect in other ways. They gave me a deadline, a week, to come up with the money. Problem was, I didn't know how much they wanted. Every time I asked, the answer was different. Sometimes it was $50,000, other times it was $100,000. They were messing with me, playing some sick game, and I had no idea what the real stakes were. I was freaking out. I didn't have that kind of money lying around. The restaurants were thriving, but we were consistently reinvesting in the business, increasing our overhead, and I couldn't simply withdraw funds from thin air. I was desperate and didn't know whom to approach. That's when I decided to contact Alex, the private detective I had hired previously to locate Marcus, and perhaps he could assist me in unraveling the mystery. Alex was reluctant to be drawn back into this turmoil, but he agreed to assist. After witnessing the dire consequences of Marcus's involvement with these criminals, he felt compelled to intervene. In the subsequent days, Alex delved into Marcus's last known location, tracing his movements and visiting the shady warehouse where he had met those individuals. Eventually, he uncovered a lead. Marcus had become entangled with a local criminal syndicate specializing in money laundering and loan sharking. They had been using small businesses like ours to launder dirty money, and Marcus had unwittingly become a part of their operation. The money they claimed Marcus had stolen was part of a larger scheme they were running, and Marcus had walked away with more than they wanted him to. The twist is that Marcus was unaware he was receiving the money. He believed it was his share from legitimate business deals they had assisted him with. In reality, it was all a scam. Alex's investigation led us to a man named Roman. Roman was high up in the syndicate, and if anyone knew what was really going on, it was him. However, reaching Roman was not an easy task. He was like a ghost, with no known address or social media presence. He operated in the shadows, and the only way to reach him was through his right-hand man, a man named Eddie. Eddie was an ex-con with a reputation for being ruthless. He ran a bar in one of the rougher parts of town, a place where the police rarely ventured, and where the patrons were just as shady as the people it served. Alex and I resolved to visit Eddie, despite my reservations about our ability to emerge unscathed. Nevertheless, I was resolute in my determination to retrieve Marcus and bring an end to this harrowing ordeal. Upon arriving at the bar, Eddie was easily identified by his imposing stature and tattoos that adorned both arms. He leaned against the counter with an air of ownership, and indeed, he did. Alex and I approached him, attempting to exude confidence despite my stomach's somersaults. "We need to talk to Roman," Alex stated with a steady voice. Eddie raised an eyebrow, assessing us. "And who the hell are you?" "We're looking for Marcus," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "We know Roman's got information," Eddie chuckled, taking a long drag from his cigarette. "Marcus, I haven't seen you in a while, but I know who you are."
He pointed at me.
"You're the guy running those little restaurants downtown. Heard they're doing pretty well." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. He knew who I was. That wasn't good. "I'll cut to the chase," Eddie said, his tone suddenly serious. "Roman doesn't talk to just anyone. You want information, you'll have to prove your worth his time." Alex shot me a look that said we're in over our heads, but I ignored it. I was too far gone to back out. "Now what do you want?" I asked, my hands sweating. Eddie leaned in close, his breath reeking of smoke and cheap whiskey. "Another business owner owes Roman a significant sum, but he's evading capture. You assist us in locating him, and in return, I will intercede on your behalf with Roman." Despite my reservations, I agreed to the plan, as every instinct within me urged me to leave immediately. Over the subsequent days, Alex and I successfully located the individual. Frank, a man who operated a small auto shop on the outskirts of the city, was not difficult to locate. He was not hiding. We found him in the process of packing his belongings, preparing to leave town permanently. When we confronted him, he implored us not to turn him over to Eddie and Roman. "They'll kill me," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't know what they're capable of." I looked at Alex, torn. If we didn't deliver Frank, we'd never get to Roman, but handing him over felt wrong. I didn't want more blood on my hands. In the end, we let him go. It was a risk, but I couldn't live with myself if I had gotten someone killed just to solve my own problems. Upon our return to Eddie's bar without success, I prepared myself for the worst. Eddie was clearly displeased, but he did not resort to violence. Instead, he issued a warning. "You're lucky I don't feel like dealing with this right now." His eyes narrowed, "but don't think Roman's forgotten about you." That night, I was convinced that everything was unraveling. I had failed to meet Eddie's demands, and now I was a marked man. Furthermore, Marcus was still at large, and I had no clue where to find him. My hope was waning, but then, unexpectedly, Marcus returned. One evening, as I was locking up the restaurant, I heard a knock on the back door. My heart stopped. I opened the door cautiously, expecting the worst, but there he was, Marcus, looking disheveled but alive. Before I could say anything, he grabbed me and pulled me into a hug. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry for everything." I stood there shocked, but relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Marcus returned, and for the first time in months, I felt like things might actually be okay. We sat down and talked for hours. Marcus shared everything with me, including his efforts to evade detection after realizing the depth of his involvement with Roman's crew. He was scared, ashamed, and uncertain about how to rectify the situation, but after months of running, he realized he couldn't continue like this. He had to face the consequences, whatever they were. Together, we decided to confront Roman directly. It was risky, hell, it was borderline suicidal, but we were done living in fear. Alex helped us set up a meeting with Roman. This time there were no middlemen, no goons, just Marcus, me, Alex, and Roman sitting at a table in a dimly lit warehouse, surrounded by the kind of men who wouldn't hesitate to put a bullet in our heads if things went south. Roman was older than I expected, mid-50s maybe, with graying hair and a steely gaze that could cut through glass. He didn't say much at first, just listened as Marcus explained everything. When Marcus finished, Roman leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. Roman, lighting a cigar, acknowledged our courage, but emphasized that courage alone does not pay debts. We lacked the funds they demanded, and Roman was aware of this. However, what he sought more than money was control over our business. He presented his proposal straightforwardly. If we agreed to relinquish a portion of our restaurant's profits, he would cease his threats and harassment. It was a difficult decision to make, as I did not want to surrender control over something we had worked so hard to establish. Nonetheless, we had no other choice. Despite my reservations, we accepted his terms. Over the subsequent months, conditions gradually improved. Roman honored his agreement, taking his share but refraining from interfering with our operations. Marcus returned permanently, and we refocused on our core strengths, expanding the hideaway. We opened 3 additional locations, each surpassing the previous in success. The restaurants became a city staple, renowned for their distinctive atmosphere and exquisite cuisine. The allure of the story behind it, 2 friends overcoming adversity to create something remarkable, was widely appreciated. However, as we expanded, our challenges also grew. Managing a chain of restaurants is no small feat, and the pressure was intense. Marcus and I were constantly working, trying to keep up with the demand while also dealing with the constant threat of Roman and his crew. They were always watching, always waiting for an opportunity to take more. Then came the day when Roman pushed too far. We were preparing to open our newest location, a massive space in the heart of the city, when Roman showed up unannounced. He wasn't there to congratulate us. Instead, he demanded a bigger cut, double what we'd originally agreed on. Marcus lost it. He'd had enough of being bullied, and he wasn't about to let Roman walk all over us again. "What do you think you're doing?" Marcus snapped, standing up from the table. "We've paid you more than enough. This ends now." Roman didn't flinch. He just looked at Marcus with that same cold smile. "It ends when I say it." Tension hung in the air like a thick fog. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and for a moment I thought we were about to witness a full-blown fight. But then something unexpected happened. Alex stepped in. "I think it's time we settled this once and for all," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. He reached into his jacket and produced a folder, placing it on the table in front of Roman. This folder contained every illegal transaction, every dubious business venture, and every individual Roman had wronged. "You have two options: leave now or face the consequences." Roman's smile wavered for the first time. He opened the folder and rapidly scanned its contents. "I am unaware of what Alex has discovered, but whatever it is sufficient to make Roman pause." "You possess courage as well," Roman muttered, closing the folder and standing up. "Although he has temporarily won, we must not underestimate the significance of his departure. We have stood up to Roman, and for the first time in years, we have achieved freedom." The subsequent months were the most fulfilling of my life. Marcus and I continued to expand the business, opening additional locations in other cities, and our success only grew from there. We hired new staff, met incredible people along the way, and created a business we were truly proud of. We still faced challenges, of course, but compared to what we had endured, they seemed manageable. Marcus was happier than I had ever seen him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we'd finally found the peace we'd been searching for. Reflecting on our journey, it is difficult to comprehend the transformation from two impoverished individuals striving to escape toxic family environments to the establishment of a thriving restaurant chain. We have overcome every obstacle that has been thrown our way. Throughout this journey, Marcus has been my constant companion, my brother in every sense that matters. Life is not perfect, it never is, but it is good. It is better than I ever imagined it could be, and after everything we've been through, I believe we have earned that. Greetings, Reddit. I am returning, and this time, the developments have taken a turn that I never anticipated. Following the tumultuous events involving Marcus, the criminal syndicate, and our endeavor to establish a business empire, I believed we had finally achieved stability. However, life has a peculiar habit of challenging one's sense of security. This time, the threat did not stem from criminals or dubious business associates. No, it originated from a source much closer to home. My parents. I have not mentioned them much in the previous parts because I did not believe they deserved any space in my life story. However, they found their way back into my life in the most unexpected manner. After Marcus and I had dealt with the criminal syndicate, life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. We were expanding our hideaway, opening new locations in major cities, and it seemed as though nothing could stand in our way. Business was thriving, and we were receiving recognition from both local and national media for our success. Two individuals who had risen from nothing to create an empire. Such stories are often highly appealing to the public. Suddenly, I received a phone call. It was from my mother, the same woman who rarely spoke to me unless to criticize me during my childhood. The same parents who treated me with disdain while my brother Danny was their pride and joy. At first, I doubted it was her. I hadn't heard from her in years. Not a call, not a text, not a birthday card, nothing. And now she was calling me. Curiosity got the best of me, so I picked up. "Hello," I said cautiously. Her voice came through, all sugary and sweet, which immediately put me on edge. "It has been a long time, dear." We have heard so much about you and Marcus and your remarkable restaurants. Your father and I are immensely proud of all that you have achieved." I stood there, stunned and proud. These were the same individuals who had shown no interest in my endeavors. They barely acknowledged my existence while I resided under their roof, but now they were suddenly proud. I was initially at a loss for words, merely muttering a vague "thank you." However, she proceeded to explain that since they had supported me throughout the years, provided me with a home, and helped me achieve success, it was only fair that they receive a portion of the success as a token of gratitude for their contributions. This revelation ignited a surge of anger within me. For what? For years of neglect, for treating me as if I were insignificant while Danny received everything, for making me feel like an outsider in my own home. "I'm sorry," I said, attempting to maintain composure. "What precisely do you desire?" She responded without hesitation. The percentage was minimal, but it was still a significant portion of my business. After all, we were family, and family shares in each other's successes. I nearly dropped the phone when they demanded a share of the business I had built with Marcus from the ground up. The same parents who had treated me like garbage now wanted to cash in on my success. I could barely contain my rage. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my cool, "you and Dad had nothing to do with this business. Marcus and I built it on our own. You can't just—" She cut me off. "Oh, I see. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us. Well, you'll be hearing from our lawyer." And with that, she hung up. I stood there in disbelief, staring at my phone as if it had just exploded. My parents, who had consistently made my life miserable, were now threatening to sue me for a share of the business I had worked so hard to build. It was absurd, and I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. However, I knew they were serious, and if they pursued this, it could turn into a nightmare. The subsequent days were a haze. Indeed, I received an official letter from their attorney demanding a substantial percentage of the business, specifically 15%. They claimed this was compensation for the years they had invested in me. I was utterly astounded by what I read. They were attempting to portray themselves as supportive and nurturing parents who had helped me succeed, rather than the emotionally neglectful individuals they truly were. Upon receiving the letter, I immediately contacted Marcus. He was equally incensed. "This is absurd," he exclaimed, pacing around the office. "They have no legitimate claim to any of this. It's nothing more than a cash grab, exploiting our success." I concur, but it does not alleviate the stress. My parents have engaged a highly skilled attorney and are determined to pursue legal action against me. In the subsequent weeks, a flurry of legal documents began to circulate. I retained Sarah Jeffries, a specialist in family law, as my attorney. She was forthright and unflinching, warning me that the case could extend for an extended period. Indeed, it did. The lawsuit escalated into a complex and contentious affair. My parents contended that they had financially supported me during my childhood, and without their assistance, I would never have been able to establish my business. They even involved Danny, asserting that the family had always supported each other and that I was breaking that bond by not sharing my success. Of course, that was all false. The truth was that I had left home as soon as I could, built my life independently, and they were now attempting to alter history to portray themselves as the victims. The legal battle stretched on for months, and during this time, I was also grappling with the stress of managing our rapidly expanding business. Each visit to one of our restaurants left me feeling that everything we had built was under threat, all due to this absurd lawsuit. However, the lawsuit, despite its severity, inadvertently brought attention to the Hideaway. Initially, local news outlets covered the story of a successful restaurant mogul being sued by his own parents, which garnered headlines. However, the story went viral, and people began discussing it online. Before I knew it, our restaurants were inundated with new customers eager to support me and witness the unfolding drama. It was astonishing. What was supposed to be a private family matter transformed into a PR opportunity. We began receiving interviews from major media outlets, and suddenly, the Hideaway was being discussed not just for its food but for the fascinating court saga. Although it wasn't the kind of attention I desired, I wasn't going to complain if it brought more business. Despite the lawsuit's brutality, my parents and their relentless lawyer pursued every aspect of my life, attempting to find any leverage against me. At one point, they even attempted to claim that Marcus and I had been conducting shady deals with our restaurants, a claim so absurd that the judge dismissed it with a roll of his eyes. The most devastating aspect was that my brother, Danny, who had always been the golden child, testified against me. He sat in court with a smug smile, recounting how ungrateful I had always been and how I had never appreciated the sacrifices our parents had made for me. I was furious. I couldn't believe he was willing to betray me for financial gain. But then again, I shouldn't have been surprised. Danny had always been the favorite, always the one who could do no wrong. In my parents' eyes, he believed that siding with them was his best chance to maintain their favor and potentially gain a share of the business. As the trial progressed, I began to feel as though I was losing not only the case, but also my sanity. The stress was overwhelming, leading to sleepless nights and a lack of appetite. Each day felt like a new challenge. Marcus attempted to maintain my focus, emphasizing the significance of our achievements and assuring me that we would overcome this adversity. However, even he could see the toll the lawsuit was taking on me. The turning point arrived during a meeting with our expansion team when I received a call from my lawyer, Sarah. Her voice was filled with excitement, a tone I hadn't heard from her in months. She announced, "I have good news. We just received a ruling from the judge. We won." My heart nearly stopped, and I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. After enduring so much stress, drama, and sleepless nights, we had finally emerged victorious. The judge ruled that my parents had no legal claim to my business, that they had provided minimal financial support during my upbringing, which was putting it kindly, and that I owed them nothing. I couldn't believe it. It was over. I had won. The best part, the ruling wasn't just a quiet courtroom victory. No, this ruling made headlines. The media had been following the case since its inception, and when news broke that I had won, it spread like wildfire. The story was everywhere, from social media to news channels and even morning talk shows. People loved the narrative of the underdog who had been sued by his greedy parents and had come out on top. The attention was overwhelming, but in the most positive way. Our restaurants were packed every night, and we were expanding faster than ever. People weren't just coming for the food, they were coming to support the person who had stood up to his toxic family. The experience was surreal. I transitioned from a state of extreme stress to riding an unprecedented wave of success, all because my parents had attempted to dismantle our business. They sought a share of the profits, inadvertently providing us with the most effective form of advertising we could have ever hoped for. Following the ruling, my parents vanished from my life once more. I have not heard from them since, and I am content with that. They received the consequences they deserved. Danny, too, has not made contact. I heard through the grapevine that he was furious about losing his chance at a financial windfall. I am relieved to see him go. As Marcus and I expanded the hideaway, we brought in a new talent, Lisa, a brilliant chef who helped us take the business to the next level. Lisa, with her bold, creative spirit and fearlessness, quickly became an integral part of the team. Her vision helped us redefine the essence of the hideaway. However, as we expanded, we encountered new challenges. Entering other cities involved facing new competitors, and not everyone was eager to welcome us. One of our most formidable competitors was a restaurant chain named Urban Tastes, led by Tom Winters. Known for his ruthless tactics, Tom would stop at nothing to eliminate competition. Upon learning of our success with the Hideaway ISS, he made it his personal mission to dismantle our business. Initially, his strategies were covert, involving the dissemination of rumors and the hiring of food critics to write negative reviews. However, when these methods failed, he escalated his tactics. He purchased properties adjacent to our restaurants and opened Urban Tastes outlets directly across the street, attempting to divert our customers. Although these actions were unethical, they were not illegal. Marcus and I were determined to fight back, yet we refused to stoop to his level. Instead, we concentrated on enhancing the hideaway. Lisa's innovative menu was an instant success. We introduced unique experiences, pop-up events, themed nights, and cooking classes. Our customers were delighted, and despite Tom's numerous urban taste locations, the Hideaway remained a popular destination. However, Tom's efforts did not cease. Following the closure of our flagship location, I received a call from one of our managers. The restaurant had been vandalized, with windows shattered, walls defaced with graffiti, and the kitchen in disarray. My anger was palpable. This incident transcended mere business. It was a personal attack. We installed security cameras and enhanced our security measures, but I knew this was not the end of the matter. Tom's relentless pursuit threatened to drive us out of business. I couldn't allow that to happen. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I confronted him directly. I showed up at one of his urban taste locations, walked straight into his office, and told him to his face that I knew what he was doing. He didn't deny it, didn't even try to pretend like he was innocent. He just smirked and said, "It's business, kid, get used to it." But I wasn't about to let him push us around. I had a plan. Over the next few weeks, Marcus, Lisa, and I collaborated to devise a new strategy. We began hosting community events at our restaurants, including charity dinners, fundraisers for local causes, and even cooking competitions. We engaged the neighborhoods, transforming the Hideaway into a space where people felt connected to something larger than just a restaurant. This approach proved successful, attracting customers not only for the food but also for the sense of community we fostered. Tom's efforts to compete with us, no matter how many urban taste locations he opened, were unable to replicate the community we had built. Ultimately, Tom withdrew, recognizing that he could not match our tactics. The Hideaway had evolved into more than just a business. It had become a movement, and no one could take that away from us. Years later, Marcus and I are still operating the Hideaway, which has expanded beyond our initial expectations. We have open locations and cities across the country and continue to grow. Lisa has become a partner, and her vision continues to drive us forward. We have built something remarkable, and no matter how many challenges we face, I know we will keep moving forward. As for my parents, they are still absent from our lives, and honestly, I am better off without them. They tried to bring me down, but all they did was make me stronger. Read it. Life has been a tumultuous journey, but through it all, I've learned that one cannot allow the past to dictate one's identity. It is essential to fight for what one believes in, even if it means challenging those who are supposed to love you unconditionally. I did, and now I am finally free.